Yeah. So yeah, about like last week's episode, man. I'm sorry about the recording levels.
That's okay.
I mean, I'm begging you to understand. I try to be a decent man.
No, I get that. I get that.
Yeah, and you ready to talk some gang of use?
Damn right I am.
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi, hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one, the only, the undisputed Ryan James Kearns.
I am the one, the only, the also undisputed Matthew James Durzigan. I just realized, I don't know if I brought this up before, but I love the irony of us, or rather you, because I don't use the line, describing us as two dashingly handsome gentlemen, considering we're doing a podcast that they don't know what our faces look like.
But they know what we sound like, and that's good enough.
That's fair.
And for those of you who are wondering what this podcast is named, I mean, first of all, how do you not know what it's named? You literally clicked on the episode, but I mean, I digress. This show is called Hey, Listen to This, and essentially what we do here is every week, me and Matt take turns picking an album that both of us are going to dissect track by track. We could bring the album to the table for a couple different reasons. We generally try to bring albums to the table that we are excited about. We never really bring like a crappy album of like, you know, oh hey, I feel like this is crap, let's bash on this.
No, we don't. We try to keep it to good albums that we like, or usually the worst ones we've listened to are ones that have sort of been molded out of minor curiosity.
Yeah.
Whether it be revisiting Yeezus or checking out Pearl Jam's newest album, or even something along the lines of Mumford & Sons, where, again, sort of revisiting from our college years. It's like, does this album still sound good? And I don't know if you've ever seen the meme of the two astronauts in space, where it's like, has it always been this way? Always has been.
Yeah, I definitely remember that meme there. Yeah. So, speaking about like the Pearl Jam review, something I want to recap with you, because the reason why I chose this album here today that we're going to be talking about, which I will allude to and tell the listener here in a moment, is that, one, like, I feel bad about suggesting that album because, one, it was probably like our lowest review. Like, just, it was such a bad experience for both of us, man.
It was really mediocre. And if they weren't making millions of dollars, I almost feel bad for Pearl Jam.
Well, also, like, you know, I was listening to like the Band's Playing episode where they were doing like a Pearl Jam draft, which is a fun concept that I enjoyed. But they were talking about like the newest record, and they were like, "Yeah, man, it's really good. It's some of the best stuff they made in years." I'm like, okay.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have ears, I guess it's okay. So the reason why I picked this album here today is that I just needed like a refresher. Like, you know, I especially after that Pearl Jam review, like, you know, Lucinda Williams was a good pick me up afterward, but like I just needed something just to raise my spirits.
I think you needed to do as well, because as I mentioned in the last episode, or I may have mentioned it a bit, or I may have mentioned it after we stopped recording, but the average score of your last three albums is a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because you gave Lucinda Williams a 7, you gave Pearl Jam a 5, and you gave Adele a 6. So... yeah,
I've been feeling the grumpies lately, man.
A little bit. You've been a little on the grumpy side recently.
So, something I want to pose to you. So I own... So the album that we're going to review today, ladies and gentlemen, just so you I can finally cut to the chase, is the 2020 album by the Australian group called Gang of Youth, and that album is called Angel in Realtime. So my relationship with this album right now is it's currently in my vinyl collection. And before I even give you, like, I let you know what my score is not before we hit that record button. So for an album to be in my vinyl collection, what score do you think I need to have? Because if it falls below the score, I will sell it, man.
Right. I would say, based on, because I know we've done a couple of them in your vinyl collection, and the lowest I can think of at the top of my head would be Hot Mulligan, which you do have on vinyl, and that was an 8. So I'm thinking 8 is probably the lowest.
So if I rate this a 7.5, I gotta sell it, man. Let's shake on it.
You sure you want to do that?
Yeah.
All right, fine. We'll shake on it.
All right, cool.
So 8 incoming at least.
Well, no, my answer was my rating was locked in, so
Alright.
so I'm not going to change it.
All right.
So for those of you who are like, what is a gang of youths? I mean, you're probably not alone.
Right.
I was surprised by their amount of Spotify listeners, which was at 1.4 million last time I checked, which is a tremendous amount. Holy cow, man. So a little blurb about the band. They formed in 2012. The members met while attending the famous evangelical church Hillsong.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And since then, the lead singer, the frontman, David LaPepe, has distanced himself from any sort of religious affiliations.
I would imagine so.
And just a little bit about him, the way that he got into music. He formed this group. Well, he got together with the band around 2012, like I mentioned, but then. He got married during this time to this girl. And she was really sick, and he started writing songs to comfort her in her times of sickness. Like when I'm talking about sickness, I'm talking stage 4 cancer. So, they've since she's still alive, but they've divorced because he realized that he was going through the motions with her, and the want was gone. So, and there's going to be more details about that whole want being gone that I'm going to talk about later on in this review. But this album here, Angel in Realtime, was recorded in New Zealand and England and took 4 years to complete. Released in February 25th of 2022. Primarily self-produced at the band's own studio in London. However, Peter Hutchins and Peter Katniss, are also on production for 2 tracks, and Katniss himself has mixed their first 2 albums, that being Gang of Youths. And the fun fact about Peter Katniss, he has worked with the National for 8 of their albums, including some of their biggest earlier stuff, that being Boxer and High Violet, and also Trouble Will Find Me. So, a pretty acclaimed indie producer there.
I would say so.
And singles from this album include The Man Himself, Tend the Garden, In the Wake of Your Leave, and Spirit Boy, all released before the album dropped.
Wow. Yeah.
So...
Yeah, they tease this out quite a bit, and I know because I noticed with a couple of other albums we've done where if I'm looking up the lyrics on Genius.com, I'll notice the album art is a little different because it's it has a single cover. That means it was released as a single. So
yeah.
I think I saw it at least 4 or 5 times with this album alone.
Yeah.
So
you ready to get at her, man?
Let's get at her.
All right, so the opening track here is called You and Everything. And dude, what an absolutely beautiful song to kick off an album. So the way the track starts, you get these chanting voices that are building up with a beautiful strings section. And you have a little pop where you get David LaPepe singing utter perfection in terms of lyrical content here. This is my bread and butter, the way that he delivers these lines here. And after that intro with that beautiful string section and all those vocal samples that are chanting, you get David LaPepe singing beautiful, utter perfection lyrics, in my opinion. And the lyrics are basically about having to say goodbye to his father and being reminded of him everywhere. And a lot of the lyrical content throughout the rest of the album, ladies and gentlemen, is basically David dealing with this fact in a lot of different facets. And some of my favorite lyrics, throughout this track here are: the places you have walked I consider holy ground, and I will love the things you love despite my prior thoughts about. those are really awesome lyrics. I mean, it can, I can definitely get into the headspace of what David LaPepe was going through. I also dig how the verses here each have their own instrumentation highlighted with this, specifically with this section where the band cuts out and we get these lines: "How do I face the world?" or "Raise a fucking kid." Like, I'm not too. I don't mind swearing in music or whatever, but raise a fucking kid, like, whenever he said fucking, like, that was a very good use of that word, man.
I agree, and I'm right there with you when thinking that this track is a great opener to the album. I dig the building intro. I think the lyrics are fantastic, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And honestly, for as minimalist as it is lyrically, I really love the chorus on this song.
Yeah.
Because I love the way he sings it, and I love how it sort of sticks itself out from the rest of the verses where he sort of sings in a low sort of... it kind of reminds me of, and actually that kind of helps me out for later, now that I think about it, the singer from Black Country New Road.
Oh.
Sort of that same sort of almost crooner type of vocal with a bit of a hushed anger underneath it that just comes out at certain points. So again, I love the chorus. I think it ebbs and flows nicely. And you, again, hit the nail on the head with the lyrics, being very descriptive and very proper about, sort of realizing, hey, this person who has been part of my life for the entirety of my life is now gone.
Yeah.
So what do I do now? And as someone who himself has dealt with this for the past 4 years with my dad passing in 2020, I kind of vibe a lot with it. Like, not with all the lyrics, obviously. I mean, I'm not smoking cigarettes at any point in my life. But, this is a great opener. And believe it or not, it is at number 2 on my favorite tracks off this album.
It's number 3 for me.
Number 3? No kidding. All right, I dig that. I dig that a lot.
I consider this track here, utter perfection, though. Like, naming a top 3 in this album here for me was a little difficult because there are 4 perfect tracks, and I'll let you know whenever we hit them. But in terms of personal preference here, but a couple, one more note I'm gonna say about You and Everything, and then we can move on to the next track here. Is I love how there's specific sections in this track here where, the title of the track is called You and Everything, and throughout the track you get an evolution of different actions of blank and everything, see you and everything, feel you and everything, hear you and everything. I thought that was an utterly great touch, and I love when stuff changes up like that. And also keep in mind the line about how am I supposed to raise a fucking kid, in mind as we get towards the last couple of tracks in the album there.
Good point.
Yeah. So you ready to move on to In the Wake of Your Leave?
Moving on to In the Wake of Your Leave, and this track is a great thematic follow-up to the opener, because basically this is David LaPepe sort of wondering, he's at the funeral and he's wondering what exactly he has to say. He's just sort of left speechless of, how do I describe this man? Do I describe him in a way that's very strong? Do I describe him in a way that, exposes my, frustrations with him? What do I choose? And I again, as someone who's been through this, you are kind of left wondering, what do I focus on? Do I focus on the greatness of this, individual who raised me, or do I look at the faults?
Yeah.
Do I look at everything? Thematically, it's a great song in that regard. I think the lyrics are very strong, but even stronger than that, I think, is the music. I love the intro, sort of the little do 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 do, before it gets into this great new wave indie pulse. The track that immediately reminded me of was Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division. Just a very driving, fast rock type of song. To me, again, it does a great job of keeping up the momentum of You and Everything. And ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived already at my favorite track on the album.
Oh my goodness! Like, right out of the gate, boom, boom for you.
2 and 1, yeah.
Yeah, man. You were like, oh my goodness, like, what's the rest of this album gonna sound like? We already reached this apex here.
Well, we'll get there.
But so yeah, I absolutely dig this track as well, man. It's not one of the perfection tracks. And I'll put my reason right out of the gate here with that, and then I can just gush about this track here with you.
Okay.
I just feel like LePepe misses some notes here. Like, it just he does that thing where like a singer will kind of land softly on a note and kind of curl up to it, and that was just a little bit off-putting for me. Is this a bad track by any means? Oh, absolutely not. I have ears. I have a brain. But the intro, like you said, it's a really great way to kick off the track. I love how it was panning the instrumentation. I felt like that was a really great touch. And the chorus here is really good. The instrumentation, I noted that I really did love what it had going on. The strings add such a beautiful touch throughout the track. The drums are keeping up the beat in such a killer fashion with that hi-hat, ride. And then the synths at the end are just so nice. And the chorus itself, David's talking about this and how it's not a thing that I've been dreaming of, and it goes without my blessing and leaves me in a rut. He's talking about just grief itself, and I mean, the closest I ever had to somebody in my life passing away is whenever my grandparents would pass, when they passed away, and I was kind of stuck in a rut too. I was just like, you're like, how am I supposed to act? What am I supposed to be like? So I really get what he's going on with. And grief is something that kind of stays with you, whether you like it or not. It manifests itself in a couple different ways. The descriptive nature of the lyrics here, talking about, I was a loser at your funeral, no emotion convoyed, again, utter perfection, no notes on that. And altogether, it's an excellent, part two, in terms of the opening track, because I feel part one we get the story of his dad passing, part two is just we're at his funeral now, so it transitions pretty nicely. So overall, really great song.
It really is. Again, there's a reason it's number one on my list of tracks on this album. So ready to move on to the Angel of 8th Avenue?
I am absolutely moving on to the Angel of 8th Avenue, and we have arrived at the second perfect track off the album.
The second perfect track off the album.
Yeah, this is my first note here is this is a fantastic song. Just holy shit.
Well then.
So a little blurb about the track before I give my more detailed thoughts on the track itself is, so this song is inspired by the frontman's experience of falling in love and finding a new life in a new city together. And it contains references to London locations and some of the experiences he has shared with his wife over the past few years. So the way that the track begins with the hand claps, the bass groove, the acoustic guitar strums, and the driving drum beat really just settle you into the flow of the songs. The synths, again, they add such a nice touch in the chorus. And lyrically, like I alluded to, this is David falling in love, getting a breath of fresh air into his life after such a tragic event had happened. And you can tell that, especially in that first verse here, where he's saying he's setting the scene, saying straight, right away I was a coward, and worse to my shame. Grief was swallowing him, and then he met his I think that they're still together, his now wife, and she basically kind of changed everything. The second verse has lyrics saying, "You called each of my sorrows by name, and a tide of tender mercies shook my body from the grave." And another excellent line here. I can go on and days about this track here specifically. But so the title of the track is Angel of Eighth. So the later on in the track, you get this set of lyrics that go, "You're the angel of eighth, and what's more, the goddamn greatest thing that Laney ever made." So I did some research about that line.
What'd you find out?
So that Laney is referring to the high school that his wife attended. That was the same school that Michael Jordan attended. So that was such a backhanded, thing to Michael Jordan.
It's like, you are better than Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
LeBron stands rise up.
But yeah, utter perfection of the track. And ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at my second favorite track off the album.
Second?
Yeah.
Wow, the way you were talking about that, I was guaranteed it was going to be number one. I'm curious to see what number one is. It didn't land in my top three, but it came super close. Like, if we ranked this 1 through, I think, there's 12, 13 tracks on here.
Yeah.
I think those would probably land at number 4 for me.
Okay.
Because I agree with you, it is a great track. The first note I had was rhythmically incessant in a good way. And I can kind of understand now where you're coming from with associating this with Bruce Springsteen, because I'm reminded of songs like Dancing in the Dark, or even I'm trying to think what else there would be. Even Born to Run to a certain extent, even though it doesn't quite have the same symphonic grandeur as that track had. I do agree the verses are very strong about finding that love and finding relief in that love. I do love the Laney reference, as you mentioned. My one small knock with this song is I wish the chorus were a little stronger lyrically.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing with, trying to be the whole stranger in a strange land type of thing, I saw that, I was like, that's a little on the generic side. Not that it distracts from this song supremely. I still think this is a great track.
Yeah.
But that's what kind of kept that in my top 3. Also, a track later on just was a little bit more interesting in that regard.
I think with the issues with the chorus that you had there, that might be a side effect of the band self-producing most of the album here. Let me curl up to my notes. So, actually, fun fact, Peter Hutchins and Peter Katniss, the two Peters, they both produced on In the Wake of Your Leave.
Oh, okay.
So, and the other song that Peter Hutchins produced on this album here was The Man Himself, but we'll get to that song.
Yeah. I don't think it sounds bad. I wish the lyrics were a little stronger than what they were, especially considering the verses are as great as they are. So again, this will be the 4th favorite track, but it's not my top 3.
Yeah. All right. Cool. You ready to move on to Returner?
Moving on to Returner, and this is the first track on the album that kind of shifts away from the first 3 tracks, talking about grief and relief from that grief. And it definitely has more of a different feel too, because while the last 2 tracks were a bit more rock oriented with the percussiveness and driving nature of the Angel of Eighth Avenue, and preceding that with, again, the fantastic indie work on In the Wake of Your Leave, this feels more like I used it somewhere in my notes, like Brit pop or Brit beat, sort of like the sort of shuffling drum sample underneath with the low end keyboards. It comes out of left field. It did put me off a little at first, but after a while I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. And the lyrics themselves fall in that same category. Describing working at a mundane job and just trying to pay the bills. That being said, though, I would understand if someone were to listen to this song and think, is this guy talking about his singing career? Because this sounds like, I'm only in it for the money. I'm not in it for the fame. I just need to pay the bills. And then the first time I heard that, I was thinking, okay, that's kind of an asshole move. But then I thought about it more. It's like, okay, now I know what he's getting at. So he's kind of saying that. The only problem I have with that is that, and again, on my second listen, I found a comparison. A few weeks back when we were talking about the Tortured Poets Department and Taylor Swift, there's a song at the end of that album called I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, which I'm pretty sure is still in the top 40 right now, or at least on the charts. And that song very much came to mind when I thought about this song, because it's very much the same sort of sardonic, oh well, I guess we're just, going to do this as is. But I felt like Taylor did it a little more chaotically and more interestingly in a sense, whereas this sort of goes in and out without too much of a rise and flow or contradiction between thoughts to make it be like, hey, guess what? We're joking. So, not my favorite track on the album. It's fine. But if we were to do, again, a ranking, I'd probably make this my third least favorite track off the album.
That's totally fair, man. One of the critiques that I had off of this track here. So, you know me, like, I love a good set of lyrics, and I love whenever, like, people can deliver them pretty efficiently. I feel like at points in this track here, he kind of gets a little bit too wordy, and then, like, the flow, it seems like the flow gets disrupted. In terms of lyrical content, you're gonna kind of laugh at this. Apparently, from what I was able to, research, and this actually came from an interview from David LaPepe himself. This was basically framed as a conversation that he had with his dad, and about like how his singing career was going before he kind of had a change of heart and realized that he was basically an asshole, like you alluded to, and like, I mean, I love a couple different sections here in terms of like what the track has to offer. The one moment that I'm going to highlight is like there are moments in this track here where the drums and the vocals match up, and that's such a nice touch. And the lyrical section I'm going to highlight is the seven inside would wait in wild disdain, because the drums match David's vocal patterns, and that's a really great touch. In the call and response dynamic that occurred in the track here with that backup vocals were really good. And yeah, the strings, beautiful. I love the strings of this whole album here as a whole. One section that I don't know, like I was kind of wrestling with is that at the end, where the lyrics read, anyways, I'll tell the guys you said hello. At first that seemed kind of weird for me, because I was just like, that's a weird way to end it. I mean, considering the nature of what the track is trying to frame itself as, I'm okay with it. I'm not happy with it, but, I feel like we go from the highs of like the first couple tracks, and now we're just kind of like, okay, we're back down to earth with this track here.
I completely agree with you on that. I think this is where things definitely regress to the mean after the, again, triple shot of fantastic nature songs that we got in the first part of this album.
So, the next track.
Unison.
So, the wordiness of the previous track is not found anywhere in this track here. Yeah. Like, this is one of the tracks that kind of had to wrestle with in terms of like my thoughts of it, because like we were going from such like intense highs, and then we kind of came crashing back down with Returner, and now we're really back at ground level in terms of like energy and flow, because this is more of like a very lush song. It's not a very fast paced song, and it kind of reminds me of like I can picture, based on like the lyrical content, like David going back to his ancestral home in Samoa, and like swimming in the lake and like going on a spiritual journey, and it was like a very like refreshing kind of track. The way that the lyrics weave in and out, and it's like he keeps saying it takes and it takes and it takes and it takes. It's not my favorite, to be honest with you. It kind of can run a little bit dry. But overall, the track as a whole it's not bad. I would consider it a good track, but it stays firmly at that level. It doesn't go any higher because of just what the track brings to the table. It's just a very lush, simple track, to be honest with you.
I agree again wholeheartedly. I think the term I used in my notes was meandering. Like I mean, I do like how it's mixed. I can hear David's vocals very clearly, which I again like, as we talked about a few weeks ago. Poor Mexicans sink an album real bad. The only part of that I think was mixed kind of poorly was the end of the track, where they sort of again bring in that little sort of like drum sample to lift things up just a little bit.
Yeah.
It kind of buries his vocals, and I didn't like that a whole lot. But that being said, I'm kind of right there with you. Really is a nothing burger of a song to me, honestly.
Yeah.
It's fine. It does its job well, and it sort of fits in the album, but I really don't have many other thoughts aside from that. I think the lyrics are pretty good. Again, talking about, finally escaping to North Carolina for a little bit, and it sort of continues sort of the question of, okay, well, what does this all mean? So I tend to think the lyrics are pretty good on that front, but again, just kind of a nothing burger of a song for me.
The only other thing I'm going to highlight that I noticed here, the horns that occur throughout the track here, and you can hear them like randomly soloing, like as a fellow like horn player, like I can always get behind that. It's always a nice touch. So the next track. Before we move on, Unison was my second least favorite track off the album.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, again, I don't. It didn't quite land in my bottom three, but we'll get to why later.
All right. So next track.
Tend the Garden. And this one also goes into 90s Britpop elements with the sort of trap beat and the lush strings. The only difference is I think it works a lot better this time. I think it does a great job of presenting sort of... It very much reminds me of, again, another contender for later on the album now I think about it. Quick side note, I had a really hard time trying to find an album to recommend based off this album, and we may very well have a decision to make later on. But anyways, back to the album. I think this track is actually pretty good. I do like the lyrics. They're not the greatest lyrics on the album, but I do think it's an interesting sort of character study of, I don't know, somebody else. Because I don't think David LaPepe is as old to remember the 60s or the 80s like he did. I think he's probably trying to reflect on his father or sort of create this sort of character study of what he thought his father was or what he thinks his father is. And we've talked about this before, the K-pop episode, talking about anti-drops. This is probably one of the better ones I've heard in a while. The way it comes back down to just piano and vocal for the chorus, I like that a lot. Not in my top three, but I really did like this track quite a bit.
So you kind of alluded to like the nature of the track of like, hey, is this David trying to process what his dad was or anything like that? That's basically what it is. Like, much later on in the album, there's gonna be a track specifically that's gonna be fleshing out a lot of details off of this story here. So this track here is basically from the point of view of David's dad, and like apparently he made some mistakes, and you get the feeling with this with him talking in the first verse about this woman and giving descriptions of what he was going on, saying he was short, skin was brown, did construction work from town to town. And there were things we did and should not have done. Been a half century since I've seen my sons. And then in the chorus where he's talking about Lord knows if they would ever forgive me, which is probably talking about like his David's dad's family, like the family that he brought into, like New Zealand and eventually London. Well, I think he moved to New Zealand and Australia. I might be getting my geography mixed up or my directions, but I digress. So Lord knows if they would ever forgive me. I won't forgive myself, at least. There are strange forces in the air only time can unleash. In a way, I still believe. So in this reflection, we have David's dad who can't forgive himself for what he did. Which, I mean, you kind of hint at, like, he has this son. There was this woman. So, I mean, one could put one and one together, and it's going to equal two. But much later on in the album, we'll get a little bit more details of what like this actually is about. In terms of the instrumentally, though, I'm right there with you. I love like the two modes that this song has. You have that little like groove Britpop that you talked about, and then you get that little like more self-reflective section where you just get piano and David's vocals lining up pretty nicely. Overall, great track here. Not in my top three, but overall, really great track. I can't have too many other notes about it though. It's pretty much as straightforward as it can be.
I'm with you right there. So, moving on to The Kingdom Is Within You.
So, The Kingdom Is Within You. So, this is very much a tribute to the working man, in terms of my opinion. This is again, the way I was able to walk away from this track here. It's more talking more about David's dad migrating into like a new area. I think it's New Zealand at this point, and discussing how he's contending with dealing with the masters and just working life as a whole, and like the guilt that he feels back at home for what he's doing. It's a very layered kind of track, and instrumentally, I dig the pullback and build back up with the second verse leading into the third verse. I felt like that was a very nice touch because you can't always go 100 miles per hour. Strings here, again, beautiful. No notes on them. Too bad I can't just be like, oh, hey, give a name to the strings because it's a group of strings. And one thing, though, I will say that kind of held this track back for me for being another perfection track is that middle section. Like the vocals and the lyrics get a little bit sloppy in the way that I was noting this whenever I was listening to this earlier on today. Like the way that the production sounds, it almost seems like David gets kind of lost in the mix and it doesn't land up. And I would say it's probably one of the sloppiest moments off the whole album for me.
I agree with you. Like, the first time I listened to it, I thought that the phrasing was very clunky. And honestly, it got better on the second time around, and I do agree the lyrics are very, very good. But I do feel, again, it is a little haphazard as far as the execution. And I said that this song could really use a bit more of a rock feel to it instead of the production, because it feels like the vocals and the production, or at least the sort of the Britpop backing that this track has, or sort of the EDM, almost light EDM, doesn't really mesh with each other. Really, it feels like it's just there, and LePepe is just sort of finding places to sing at instead of it flowing in and out of each other. Not so bad that it fell into my bottom three, but definitely. Again, the lyrics save this song from being there. I think the lyrics are fantastic here. And even then, the chorus is a little hooky at times, the upside of it, the upside of it. But, again, just a little too many flaws for me to really recommend it either.
Yeah, I mean, I really digged how LePepe did sound in there, where he's just in the most, he was singing those notes, he sounded really good. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, this song it's not my least favorite off the album. We'll eventually get to that track here. I really don't feel honestly that there's a bad track on this album. Spoiler alert. But I mean, there's some tracks that definitely stand out more than others. So, the next track is Spirit Boy.
Spirit Boy, and this one's a pretty good one, too. I do like the marching feel of the track, and I think it works very well with the lyrics. I think as far as the pop nature of these tracks go, this one is one of the stronger ones. I think the vocals on the chorus are fantastic. It soars above the verses, which is very much what You and Everything did as well. The interlude that's in the middle of the track, I appreciate it being there, and I like what it represents. Sort of this, sort of guiding lights, talking in, I'm not sure what language it is. But regardless of the language and, the meaning itself being very good, I just wish it were mixed a little better. Because I've listened to this album in two different ways, and both times I was just like, this could have been cleaned up just a little bit. I think this track has a better flow than most. I think the lyrics are good. Not my top three. And yeah, I think this is a solid track.
So, not one of the perfection tracks here for me. It came very close, though.
It is good.
Yeah. I would say that this is probably one of the most beautiful songs off the album, which is something to say considering that there's countless amount of songs here that are utterly beautiful. So this, I did... the chorus was probably, one of my favorite highlights here. Whenever you hear that, you got that little pause, and then it hits you right away. I thought that was a very nice touch. And yeah, lyrically the song is solid as well. The opening verse was fantastic. We're talking about God died today. He left me in the cold. He stumbled down a path. He died upon his knees on the way to the commode. Which you think about, God as this glorious concept going up to use the bathroom, which is probably the most indignant way of dying. So, let's see what else here. The piano lick that occurs after this spoken word bit that you alluded to is so nasty. It's just a little 3-second thing, and I love how you can hear it in the background afterwards. I thought that was a very nice touch. I love the instrumental break that talked about the when you were alluding to the spoken word. I think the knee I didn't notate what language it was in. I think it's it's probably in some Samoan tribe thing, because that's where his family's originally from. So there was moments here where you can really feel like David's trying to raise himself out of his grief with lines that are you raised me up now, pulled me out of my mind, and filled me with significance I cannot describe. And also these lines, how normal all the tragic feels, how tragic all the normal feels. That set of lines, though, is really, really good. Still, it was just missing that one thing that kind of took it over the edge.
I agree. And by the way, it's Te Reo Maori is the name of the language.
Oh, okay.
So it is native to La Pepe's tongue.
There we go. But yeah, overall, this track here did not land in my top three. Didn't land in my bottom two, but Yeah,
it lands comfortably, I would say, in the upper half of the album.
Yeah. So, the next track is Brothers. And, ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at the other perfect track. Another perfect track off the album, but it is not my favorite off the album. So, we still got one more perfect track and one of my favorites coming up here.
Okay.
So, this one was one I kind of wrestled with in terms of should it land in my top three, and I'm kind of sticking to my guns, but that is not taken away from the beauty of what this song is. I was even reflecting on this song earlier whenever I was doing my listen through, just to get myself dialed in for the review today, and throughout the track you just get David and the piano. And I even noticed that the phrasing and the way that David was delivering lyrics, they were matching up with the piano 100%. They were one and the same in this sense. And lyrically, this track here is basically David talking about. So we talked about Tend the Garden, right? And how he was this was David's dad talking about hey, I made mistakes, and there was this woman and I have sons. this is him flushing that out 100%, but from David's perspective, him dealing with the fact that, like, post, like, his dad passing away, he discovered, like, his dad kept horrible secrets. And I'm not gonna read every single lyric, but like the significance of the secrets where he lied about his heritage, he lied about his birth certificate, and I mean, but at the end of the day, like the reason why he did that is to give his sons the best life that he could, and then getting into the sections about the brothers that David never knew that he had, like the half brothers. So like there is this one Wesley, who is the he still lives in Auckland, which is in New Zealand, if I can remember correctly. And
It is.
Oh, sweet. I know geography, but he's talking about like how Wesley's seen the police brutality, and he lives in Auckland with his wife and dog. He stands a shade above 6'3", and his like their father left him with a cousin, and he got into trouble frequently. And then you get the story about this brother Matthew is a baker. Giving more details about that, and one line that really hit for me is that the story about like how Matthew tracked David down at a music festival and basically said, "Hey, that his father left him at the hospital, but if Matthew can forgive their father, maybe David said maybe then I should too." That line kind of really hit very hard.
I wholeheartedly agree, and it is in my top 3 at number 3. For many of the reasons you covered, I will add a few of my own. I love the sing-songy nature of it, especially considering he's talking about like all these things that were hidden from his childhood, and he's trying to sort of recollect with the history of his father with the own history that he was provided. The passive-aggressive tones on this track are deliciously menacing. And I've talked about this before, how I'm a sucker for songs that make you visualize, the situation it's being played in. Mm-hmm. I can very, very vividly envision David LaPepe playing this in the funeral home, surrounded by his loved ones, pissing everyone off. This might be one of the most bludgeoning middle fingers of a song I have ever heard, and I mean that very complimentary, because it's not just the lyrics that, again, very in a sing-songy way, talk about these very heinous secrets that are now coming to light, but even like the parts where he's not doing that, where he's just going la 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 la, like the fact that he's just singing along in this very menacing tone that very much is probably upsetting to everyone around listening to this, and also probably himself. That is, I am taking this ship down and you're all coming with me. And granted, I'm not recommending that people go out there and do this vibe every day, but for this track, it is so good. So again, it is in my top 3. It's at number 3. And the last thing I'll say about it is that this almost feels like the eulogy that didn't come from In the Wake of Your Leap. Like, now all the stuff's finally coming out.
Yeah. And it's a fact that, like, every human being has to deal with at the end of the day. Like, not to this extent of, like, all the horrible stuff that his dad, like, held back and, like, kept in the dark, but, like, realizing that your parents aren't perfect people. So, like, it's a hard pill to swallow, and to this degree, after finding out about like his dad passing, finding this out after his dad has already passed, like that must have been very hard for him.
It really, yeah. So
the next track, Forbearance,
and I'm just gonna come out of the gate and say it. We go from my third and most favorite track to my second least favorite track on the album. And even then, it's not a terrible song. It's very much a track that, once again, dives into LaPepe's sort of self-loathing, where he's looking at his past about how he was a partying kid at probably upset his parents one too many times and wondering, now that time has passed, can I really be forgiven for these transgressions? Am I willing to forgive myself for these transgressions? I think the vocals are very mixed very clearly and strong. The beat's fine. Ultimately, though, once again, I think this is just a nothing burger of a song. And I think maybe it's because of the... Again, I think it's both juxtaposition and content, where this is following, again, such a strong, menacing, unforgettable piece of work like Brothers. For it to be followed like this is kind of like a sort of a limp follow-up. And also, again, I think just the lyrics themselves about the self-loathing. I'm not usually a fan of woe is me type stuff in songs, especially whenever, a lot of the content is stronger. So, again, it leans very hard in nothing burger territory. And again, I have it as my second least favorite because of that.
So this is not my least favorite track off the album, and it's not my favorite track off the album. So if we're limiting both of those ends of the spectrum there,
yeah, it just lands right in the middle.
So I think I dug this track a little bit more than you did, and the whole self-loathing aspect kind of comes around the fact that earlier on, like at the start of the review, I talked about the reason why David got divorced from his first wife. It was because he lost the want. Like he didn't want anything. Well, this song kind of talks about the events that occurred whenever David almost committed suicide. So. And that's something that he's kind of wrestled with for a while, because like the way that he was gonna, before I say anything else, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going through a rough time and you are thinking about doing this, one, permanent solution for a temporary problem. Two, just pick up a phone, call somebody. Like, you got to figure that, your actions have a greater impact on what else could occur. I'm sure you have countless amount of loved ones who will be affected by your leave. That being said, back to the album. So the way that he was gonna, commit the act was he was gonna walk into traffic, and then he realized, what a fucking asshole I am. Like, I was gonna put my grief onto somebody else for killing me. Like, so he has that kind of that regret. That being said, though, there are sections here where there's a whole lot. This might be one of the. I might agree with you. This is kind of a nothing burger of a track here, because like even thinking about it, like other than that little blurb about David's past, like I can't really other than the lyrical content, talking about and the world isn't done with me yet. If the whole thing was fair, it would be me that was fighting for air. Like, those kind of lyrics, like they're solid. I dug the repetition of the line "Rise and rise, you great old thing" at the end, and at the end, I felt like that was a great moment, and it was almost like David asking for forgiveness that he can't grant himself. Overall, though, I feel like this is more of a transition song than anything. It was just kind of a pivot. We went from such a hard song, Brothers. We have to pivot into the rest of the track, the rest of the album here.
I kind of get what you're saying, though, and I don't disagree. But at the same time, I kind of wish they hadn't made that transition back, only because, again, I personally prefer the indie stuff from the start of the albums, or the more indie rock type of stuff, than the Britpop thing. And that's just a personal thing. If you like, sort of the 90s Britpop thing, that's your prerogative, and I'm totally cool with that. But as we'll get into, I think that the stuff at the start, and again, the more chaotically interesting stuff like Brothers, sticks out more to me.
So, the next track.
The Man Himself.
And we've arrived at my favorite track off the whole album.
Really?
Yeah, this track is utter perfection.
Do tell.
So, I think the thing that initially drew me to this track was the fact that, like, throughout this whole, like, we get spurts where David's pulling himself out of his grief, right? We get Angel of Eighth Avenue and a couple other tracks where you can feel himself out. This is where you can really feel that David's, like, really starting to summon the strength and to pull himself out. He's saying he wants to be his own man. And, like, he's looking to the past of, like, lines about, like, there were angels in the ornaments and underneath you, and they're humming away till I get what I need. And also talking about, like, I'm looking for sage advice. You'll be humming away, like everything's fine. So, like, in those first few verses that I mentioned, those moments, it's where David's looking for advice from his dad, but it's almost like his dad's looking down on him and saying, "You got it, man. You are your own man." So it's a very pivotal moment in a person's life whenever you start to realize, oh wait, no, I got this. Like, I'm no longer a child. Like, I can actually, like, make informed decisions. The chorus is just so big, and like I said, it's such a nice touch considering that David has battled with his identity after the loss of his dad, and for him to accept the fact that he might not be ever right again, but he's determined to be his own man is so good. The way he sounds when he's holding out those notes are so fucking good, in my honest opinion. And yeah, the way that the track kicks off with more of those vocal samples and strings that bleed into a drum machine, and how it comes in and just gets the groove, just sets everything so right. So I absolutely love this track. Are you gonna break my heart?
I'm going to break your heart.
Okay.
This is my least favorite track on the album.
Oh, have we ever had this before?
I was just wondering that myself. I don't know if we have.
Yeah.
And I'll come out and say I don't even think this is a horrible track by any means. Like, I've heard worse on other albums. I think the vibes on it are solid. I think the lyrics are quite good. I think the outro itself is good. But unfortunately, the way that chorus comes across to me is way, way, way too clunky for me. It almost felt like you took Kings of Leon and put it in a blender. Like... It just, the phrasing of it, again, like, and this is nothing on the lyrics themselves or what they mean, because I agree that they do present a very strong story, but just I don't know, and I'm not saying every song has to be, ta, tifi ta, follow the execution, make sure you end the line by this phrase. But again, on repeated listens, I just felt like it was just a little too haphazard for me. Again, not a terrible track. Like, we're not talking, the start of Yeezus or Running from Pearl Jam, or I'm trying to think what other songs really upset me that would I rather listen to this or what was the one I hated from Talking Heads? Swamp? Yeah, Swamp. Yeah, I think I don't know if I'd rather listen to this or Swamp. I'd probably rather listen to this, honestly. But in the context of this album, all things aside, the execution of the chorus being as haphazard was, put it right at the bottom for me.
All right. Well, agree to disagree.
That's fair. That's fair.
I think we've never actually had,
No, I feel we've come close, but I don't think we've ever gotten to the point where someone's favorite track is a least favorite track. I'll have to go back and look that up.
So, the next track.
Hand of God. Now, this track I liked a lot. I thought that the overall piano work and the very muted nature of the track, almost like a church hymn that he's probably writing for himself, really works very strong. The way, he does the phrase of, amen. Like, you could tell, like, he's feeling like the religious nature of his own grief, like, just sort of eating at him in his soul. My only real knock on this track is that the lyrics don't really seem to be about a whole lot aside from that. Like again, we've had vivid lyrics like we had with The Angel on 8th Avenue, and even the likes of Brothers. This one felt like it was more of a vibe track than anything else, but I thought the vibes were fantastic. Again, if not for the excellence of the other three, I'd probably have this very close to my top three as well. And it's a very strong way to sort of wrap this around. And I also do like, and I didn't realize this to my second listen through, the referentiation. Is that a word?
Go with it.
The reference to the 1986 World Cup, I believe it was, where Diego Maradona scored the goal using the quote-unquote hand of God, which for those of you who don't know was just the most illegal goal to have ever existed in the history of soccer. He just batted that shit in with his bare hands, and everyone's just like, yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah, no, that's fine. That's totally fine.
Oh man! Oh my goodness. So this is my least favorite track off the album.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I'm curious as to why.
So I mean, it was another one of the tracks that. Do I think it's a bad track? No. But the lyrics did kind of sink it though, because it was some of the most empty calorie lyrics that we ever had. Like we've had throughout this whole album here, and like for a good portion of like our history of our show, like again, like it's probably the most empty calorie lyrics. Like you get lyrics of balls flying, the greats dying, the boss at Goodsonian was a Copti coach. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like it's not really connecting. Outside of the lyrics, though, it's a beautiful track. Like, I love the vibes that it was going for. I love the church aspect of it that you kind of alluded to, where he was saying Amen and Hallelujah. Like, I thought that was a great touch. But overall, like this track is really good. It could have bumped easily like a couple spots up and maybe even cracked my top three if it wasn't for the fact that the lyrics are just so empty. Like.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. They are rather inane, and again, I think that's what synced it for me. I think if it were a little bit deeper and a little bit more personal, like a lot of this album has been, it probably lands comfortably in my top three, but it didn't, so it didn't.
So, you ready to close it out here?
Let's close it out with Goal of the Century.
So, funny thing about this track here is that I didn't even realize that it bled so seamlessly from the previous track into what it is, because when I did my second listen through on it, I was just like, okay, wait, this Hand of God seems like it's going on for a while. Let me check. Oh wait, we're on to Goal of the Century.
Yeah.
So in terms of the name of the track here, it's another reference to the World Cup match that Matt was talking about. It's the second goal that was scored by that specific player. But in terms of this track here, it wraps up a lot of the themes pretty nicely on a bow. But I'm talking about the instrumental side first, and then I'll talk about the lyrics. So. So again, less strings throughout the track are absolutely beautiful. They're so bloody good. The less strings lead into more vocal samples that build alongside drums that pop in, and everything pops into the main section of the track. And you can hear chanting and pianos throughout the main parts of the first half of this track. That it was a great aspect. The horns that you hear in the background, alongside the polyrhythms, are a great touch. And then the the change up that occurs around the lyrics, "There will be peace in the valley," is so fucking good. I think I dropped more F-bombs in this review.
This might be a record, honestly.
Yeah. You get more of in that section saying that there will be peace in the valley, you get a more stripped back version of the track, and that is the perfect way, like from there on out, that is the perfect way to end this album and the track and the album as a whole. And at the end of the track, you get a familiar cadence, like harkening back to the previous track. You get the hints of the Amen and Hallelujah. Yeah, instrumentally, I absolutely dug what this song had to offer.
I didn't quite as much. I think this track is pretty solid. I do really like the flow in from the end of the previous track. I think that was very strong. I did like the comeback to the hymnal outro that Hand of God provided. Aside from that, though, it didn't really quite stick out to me as much. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the closer from Brave Faces Everyone, in the sense of this feeling of, okay, now where do we go from here? Once again. But again, the lyrics I don't think stuck out to me quite as much. I think the chorus was a little clunky too. But it's not a bad way to end the album. Not the best way, but not a bad way either.
So, one other thing I want to highlight about this track here, and then we can give our overall thoughts and ratings. So, lyrical content. You get hints about, like, embracing, like, the positivity in life. And also, you get various callbacks to previous themes in the track, talking about like angels and islands, it's warm in the islands, talking about brothers and God is forgiven. And this section here, it messed me up a little bit because when we talked about the opening track, You and Everything, and talking about like how am I supposed to raise a kid. You get here where David seems like he's almost at peace with everything. Talking about like at 6 a.m, the wife is sleeping. We're thinking of children. I wish you could meet them. In a way, it will feel like you were an angel in real time. Like the way that ended. No notes.
Yeah, I will agree that was a very nice way to end things, and I do agree those lyrics were very strong. Again, I think the back end of this song and the front end of this song were very strong with the flowing from Hand of God and the sort of return to the piano work of Hand of God. It's just that little middle section that kind of made a little meh for me, but ultimately a solid track itself.
We did it, man.
We did it. We found the angel in real time. And we reviewed the album in real time.
So, I'm gonna let you go first.
You're gonna let me go first? All right.
Yeah, I'll let you go first. Unless you want me to go first.
No, I'll go first.
Okay.
So overall, I thought this album was quite good. I think this album was a very strong album lyrically, describing again the hardships of dealing with, the loss of a parent or the loss of some guiding light in your life, and I thought that part was very strong. On the other hand, though, a lot of the production choices on this album, and I think even to a point, LePepe's vocals, as nicely as they were mixed, did kind of murmur on a little bit for me, and not in the way where it's like, oh, I hate this. It's more like a, not quite my thing type of thing. That being said, though, I don't regret listening to this album at all, and I probably will at some point consider looping back to it. I wish, again, some of the lesser tracks like The Man Himself or even the likes of Returner or Forbearance, if they had been eliminated, like this would possibly go down like an all-time great. But that being said, I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10.
I'm glad that you liked it, man. So, my thoughts. So, you said like I had to make sure that this was rated an 8.
Yeah, otherwise you were going to sell it.
I'm going to sell the album. All right, so this band is a very special band for me. And this album has grown on me throughout the whole process of this review. Like, because the album recommendation that I'm going to give is something I'm a little bit more familiar with, and it's what made me fall in love with the band as a whole. There are moments in this album where the lead singer is putting his heart on the table, and honestly, it makes me want to believe in everything again. However, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I'm going to call a spade a spade. There are moments where, like, it just doesn't stick the landing, and the album and the band becomes a little bit more a little bit too self-indulgent for their own good. However, though, I will say this album is a work of art nonetheless. I'm going to give it a score of 9 out of 10.
Okay, 9 out of 10. I feel like that's I want to say this like the second or third time that this has happened where I've given it a 7.5 and given it a 9. I know we did this for Surfer Rose. I can tell you that right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So I'll have to go back and look at the database to see where this lands in that categorization. But okay, I can respect that. 9 out of 10. As far as recommendations of what album to review next, I actually came up with more and more as we were talking about the album. Like I'm thinking maybe something like indie-like, maybe some early Arcade Fire, or even for the Britpop nature, something along the lines of Play by Momi, which is a great album of itself. But I'm going to stick to my guns. I referenced the album earlier. It's not technically an album, but it's an EP, but it's as long as an album, so screw it. It is For the First Time by Black Country New Road, an album that we have reviewed earlier in our history, because I feel it very much touches on the same tones of dealing with life past a certain point and wondering what to do now. So, and I think the vocals are very much the same. LePepe's vocals on this album very much similar to that of Black Country New Road. Obviously, I wouldn't say that In the Wake of Your Leave is quite as strong as something like what was the great song off that album?
Sunglasses?
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
I think I would rather prefer Sunglasses to that, but that's just sort of a nitpick. For the First Time by Black Country New Road would be my recommended album.
And mine's going to be an easy. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to recommend their previous album by Gang of Youths. The album's called Go Further in Lightness. You don't get nearly as much of like the lush, Britpop stuff that is littered throughout this whole album. But it's more of a I don't want to say straightforward, but it has more of a rock kind of feel, and it has one of the most like a lot of the songs off of that album are a lot faster, and they ride the choruses a little bit better. If you dug Angel in Realtime, check out Go Further in Lightness or For the First Time by Black Country New Road. That's our official recommendations there.
Yes. Now it is my turn.
All right. So I feel refreshed.
You feel refreshed?
Yeah. I after a little bit of I don't want to say a rough patch for me. Like I'm ready to get back at it, man.
So I am going to give you two options, and I will give you a few notes about these two options.
Okay.
They're both older albums. One is from the late 60s. One is from the early to mid-ish 70s.
Okay.
One is significantly longer than the other in time. One's maybe about a half hour long. The other is about an hour and 15 minutes, so it's about a 45-minute difference.
Okay.
But in either case, we are getting horny.
Okay, here we go.
But not in the way, not in the Mick Jagger, Led Zeppelin tour bus type of way. More in the we used to be in marching band type of way, which really isn't that much of a just now that I say it out loud. The point is we're talking about bands with horn sections.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you two options, and they're based on the city where they come from.
Okay.
Either Chicago, Illinois, or Oakland, California.
Okay, so I can pretty much guarantee you I know what Chicago is going to be. So we're going to go to Oakland, California.
Okay, all right. You have picked the album that is less in time. You have picked an album from 1973, and you have picked the eponymous third album by one Tower of Power. That'll be what we're talking about next.
All right. Here we go, man. Tower of Power.
Tower of Power.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've not listened to the album Tower of Power, what's the album title?
Tower of Power.
Oh,
It's Tower of Power by Tower of Power.
Oh, self-titled.
That's what I meant by eponymous.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to throw you off there.
Yeah, I was just here for the vibes, man. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've not listened to the self-titled album by Tower of Power, make sure that you listen to that before next week's review. And yeah, If you've not listened to Angel in real time and you have gotten to this point in the episode, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I hope that both me and Matt have at least given you a good feeling about at least exploring the album, maybe a couple of the singles at least. But do you have anything else to add before we send it out?
No, I appreciate this album. I did like it quite a bit. And again, I think to me, this album started strong and then sort of cooled off towards the mid. And except for Brothers, sort of stayed there throughout the remainder. But still a very solid, good album in my opinion.
All right, cool. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've gotten to this point in the episode, let's face it, you wish that you could be in this room right now with us, like experiencing this podcast, because you like what you're hearing. And if you want to treat yourself to more stuff that you actually like, and you want to support me and Matt in our podcasting adventures, make sure that you leave a positive rating on the podcasting platform of choice that you're listening to us on. And make sure you also follow, subscribe, whatever the action is that you need to do to make sure that you stay up to date with our episodes. If you're listening to this on the YouTubes, make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below of how you felt about the review and the episode as a whole. And social media links are down in the episode description. And yeah, that's basically it. So for the last time in this review about Gang of Youths, I'm the one, the only, the undisputed, the everly, dashingly good-looking man who has one of the best podcasts on this side of the Mississippi, Ryan James Kearns.
And I'm the one, the only, the undisputed, I'm not even going to get into that many details about myself, Matthew James Durzick.
And yeah, I mean, after this review, man, I don't know. I don't know what to feel. I don't know how to feel right about it. But I tell you what, though.
What?
I want to become my own man.